Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final PowerPoint of the semester. It's really hard to believe that 15 weeks have flown by so fast, but I just want to take a minute and thank each one of you for a really engaging class. I've learned a lot from each one of you, and I hope you've taken something away from this class as well. In our last unit of the semester, first of all, I just want to mention that there is no independent new assignment for this last unit. There is a discussion board, as I know some of you have already seen, and the rest of the time, I want you to begin reviewing your notes from earlier this semester. The final exam will be posted by the end of the week, and you'll have, I need to count the number of days, about a week or so, maybe 10 days to work on it. So that'll give you enough time to grade them before grades are due and the graduation deadline is upon us. So there's no independent homework assignment this time, just the final exam coming out at the end of the week. So as we bring the semester to a close, I want to spend some time in this final unit doing a brief review of some of the key ethics rules that we've covered all semester, because that is such an underpinning of our day-to-day lives, is just going about our work, but keeping in mind that we have ethical obligations to our clients, to the courts, and to the legal system. But I also want to spend some time talking about regulation of the paralegal profession and what you guys think about the future of the paralegal profession. Okay, so just a little bit of a return to ethics. I wanted to make sure we understood this concept of fiduciary duty. Lawyers, well, actually, I'll back up for a second. Hopefully by now in the paralegal studies program, you've had an opportunity to hear the word duty in other contexts, like the idea of a tort and the law of negligence, where we say that defendants or individuals have duties of care to those around us. But there's another word that we use with duty, and that's called fiduciary duty. And a fiduciary duty is a higher level of obligation. So a regular duty might be that I have a duty of care when I drive my car to not speed. I have a duty to follow traffic laws and to be a safe driver on the road. I also have a duty in my home that if you're a guest in my home, I have a duty to warn you about broken or dangerous objects in my home. Like if I have a loose stair or banister, I have a duty to let you know about that. That's part of my duty of care as a homeowner. But a fiduciary duty is even a higher level of duty. Lawyers owe their clients a fiduciary duty. Think of fiduciary duty as the highest level of good faith that one party can owe another party. So it's actually uneven. The client does not owe this obligation to the attorney. It's the attorney that owes the obligation to the client. So what does this mean to act in the highest level of good faith towards our clients? Well, it certainly means to act in the best interest of the client. And then you can start to see where all these ethical rules come from. It means maintaining the confidentiality that our clients give us so that we keep their confidence is secure. We don't risk them being out in the open, being seen by third parties. We disclose our conflicts so that if there's a potential conflict of interest, we tell our clients about it. And hopefully we don't even have any conflicts of interest to begin with, because how can we act in the best interest of our client if we have those conflicts of interest? And the final one I want to mention that we sometimes hear when we hear about lawyers is acting zealously, zealously representing our client, which really means putting everything into representing this client and acting in their best interest at all times. So just a bit of a review of some of these key principles: conflicts of interest, confidentiality, acting in the best interest of our clients. So let's talk a little bit about attorneys and paralegals. Obviously, we've been talking about that a little bit all semester, but I wanted to come back to one key component, which is that although paralegals have a lot of independence, are doing a lot of sophisticated legal work like legal research, drafting documents, working with and interviewing clients, witnesses, preparing exhibits, and so forth, preparing documents for real estate closings or will signings, very high level work. At the end of the day, the attorney is responsible for your work. The attorney is the one who's bound by the rules of the rules of professional responsibility that we've looked at. And we've also seen how embedded in those rules is an obligation of attorney oversight and attorney responsibility for your work. It certainly doesn't mean that you should shirk your responsibilities and not care what you're doing because it's the attorney that's on the hook, but it just means that in your job, in your day-to-day lives, I want to make sure that you know that you should be receiving proper guidance, proper oversight. You never want to be in a situation where you feel like, as the paralegal, you're left to figure out everything on your own. Talk to the client, reach out to the court, prepare all the documents. That should not be the case. The attorney can delegate all of this work to you, and they should, but it should be a relationship where the attorney is mentoring, providing guidance, oversight, and helping you reach whatever the goal is to help the client. So just a bit about understanding that relationship in the law office. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about paralegal guidelines. And this is something really interesting to me. Now, I went to law school. I went to an accredited law school, accredited by the American Bar Association. When I graduated law school, I am a lawyer. I am now a lawyer, but I'm not yet licensed to practice law. In order to practice law, I have to take an exam, the bar exam, and every state in the country provides its own bar exam. And I need to, I studied for the bar exam, and if you pass the bar exam and you are of high moral character, they want to make sure I'm not, a delinquent, then I can become a member of the bar. And at that point, I'm referred to. Once I passed the bar in the state, and obviously I took the Massachusetts bar, I am licensed to practice law. So think about that word license for a second. We use the word license in a lot of contexts. In order to lawfully drive the car, we have to obtain a driver's license. The barber or hairdresser that cuts your hair, they have a barber's license. Doctors, nurses, dentists, dental hygienists, these are all what we call regulated industries. You can't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I want to be a dental hygienist. Even if you take dental hygiene coursework, you still can't be a dental hygienist unless you are licensed. And you can't practice that trade unless you obtain the license. And that is true for a number of industries that we've just mentioned here. In order to practice the trade, the state must set standards, and you must adhere to those standards, which usually mean taking an exam and paying a fee to the state, and then you can practice your trade. Paralegal is a little different. Unlike lawyers, unlike doctors, nurses, dental hygienists, electricians, plumbers, it's not a regulated industry. There's no state exam that you take to become a paralegal. There's no national guidance other than, of course, we'll talk about the ABA, but there's not a national exam that you take to become a paralegal. You are not part of a licensed profession. You don't have to pay fees to the state to maintain that licensure or continue your legal education, for example. So it's a really interesting piece because clearly it's a profession with a lot of professional obligations, ethical obligations, and rules and guidelines, but without that state regulation piece. So what that means is you will run into people throughout your life in your legal career where they will say, I'm a paralegal. And you might say, what was your training? What was your background? And there isn't a specific set of educational guidelines required. Some people get hired by law firms, I don't recommend this, with no legal experience and no coursework under their belt, and they get the label of being a paralegal. And that's not unlawful. It's not like they're holding out and representing themselves as being something that they're not. It just means we're not uniform in the regulation. The profession isn't regulated. That being said, we obviously have some standards that we adhere to. You can certainly look at the job ads, and you've had an opportunity to do that this semester, where you can see that employers prefer not only some years of experience in the legal profession, but also a paralegal certificate or degree from an ABA approved school. As you all know, and as we've mentioned in the class, the American Bar Association is the entity that accredits law schools, and they also give approvals to paralegal studies programs. So although you as the paralegal don't have to obtain your own license, we here at this program, it's almost like a licensure. I have to get an approval from the ABA. Every 7 years, I submit a very large report with all kinds of information the ABA asks for. In fact, many of you will probably hear from me in a year or two as I go back and collect all kinds of information from current students, former students, employers, that is part of obtaining our ABA approval. So there is a check on what we do here, and that helps prepare you and prove to the employers and to the profession at large that you are properly trained. So you can obtain an ABA certificate, or you can obtain a degree like an associate's degree. And some schools have bachelor's degrees like Suffolk University and Tulane and GW, and there's some others where you can obtain a bachelor's degree in paralegal studies from an ABA approved school. But this is something I want you to note because I've seen this language be misused just generally. When you graduate from Middlesex, you should not refer to yourself as a certified paralegal. That's not a word or phrase that the ABA uses. And since there's not licensure, there isn't a formal certification through our school. You're not a certified paralegal. You are a graduate of an ABA approved program. You received your paralegal certificate, some of you, or you received your paralegal degree from an ABA approved school. Don't refer to yourself as a certified paralegal. Just want to make sure that we have that language straight because it's important when you put it in a resume or you write it in a letter to a prospective employer that this is where your degree is from. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, but I know that there's something called certified paralegals. I've heard about it. So although states don't license paralegals, and the government, the federal government does not license paralegals, and the ABA does not license paralegals, there are two organizations that I think you're familiar with just from some readings in this class that are voluntary certifications. Please let me stress this word voluntary. You do not need to obtain certifications from NALA or NIFPA, which is the National Association of Legal Assistants and the National Federation of, I forgot what the PA stands for, Paralegal Association maybe. You do not need to obtain their certifications to obtain a job. Let me say that again. You do not need to obtain these certifications to advance in your career or get a job. These are purely voluntary. In my professional experience, my personal experience, this is more, it's somewhat regional. There are some parts of the country where employers may look for these certifications more than others. The greater Boston area, this is not a big, I don't want to say not a big thing, but it's not as big as it is in other parts of the country, but I'm not taking anything away from it either. So let me just briefly talk about the advantages these organizations do provide. Because they are paralegal associations, they provide a wealth of information for you. And for that reason, I think they are wonderful organizations. They promote the paralegal profession. They promote the professionalism of the profession and the growth of the profession and the high standards that we come to expect at an ABA approved school. So I have only good things to say about these organizations. Again, that doesn't mean you have to or should obtain the certifications. If you are, though, advancing in your career and you're looking for additional education, additional buttressing to the information you already know, then I would recommend looking into it. Both of these organizations offer an exam, and passing the exam allows you to then say you have a paralegal certification. But please note the paralegal certification is with those organizations through NALA or NIFPA. So it's not a certification from Middlesex. It's not a certification from a state like Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. And it's not a certification from the ABA. So the certification is through these organizations that operate independently from the state and independently from the American Bar Association. I see that I'm coming up against 15 minutes. I'm going to end this video here, but I will pick up and finish talking about NALA and NIFPA on the next PowerPoint and one other important trend about the paralegal profession.